The Whisper in the Darkness. Sophia had never been afraid of the dark. She grew up in a large, old house where the wooden floors creaked under invisible footsteps and the wind whispered through the cracks in the walls. As a child, she had learned to ignore the noises of the night, convincing herself that ghosts only existed in stories. But this house was different. She had moved in just 2 weeks ago. A remote mansion, isolated on the outskirts of the city. It was an old Victorian-style home, elegant yet abandoned, its walls covered in ivy and its windows reflecting the emptiness inside. The rent was unbelievably cheap, but she didn't question it. She was desperate for a quiet place to work on her novel. Her first few nights were uneventful. The silence of the countryside was both comforting and unsettling. She would often wake up in the middle of the night, feeling an odd pressure in her chest, a sensation she attributed to stress. Then the whisper came. It was the third night when she first heard it, soft, distant, almost indistinguishable from the wind. Sophia. She sat up in bed, her pulse quickening. The voice had been faint, but unmistakable. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. Maybe it had been a dream, she told herself. The house was old, and old houses made noises. But the next night it returned. Sophia, a whisper, low and hoarse, like the breath of someone standing just behind her. She turned on the light instantly, scanning the room. The antique furniture stood motionless. The shadows clung to the corners, undisturbed. Yet the air felt heavy, as if something had just left, slipping away before the light could reveal it. She barely slept that night. The shadows in the corner. Days passed, and the whisper became a routine, a horrible, persistent presence that only made itself known in the dead of night. Then the shadows started moving. At first, it was subtle. She would catch glimpses of them in her peripheral vision, longer than they should be, darker than the room allowed, a shape shifting just outside her field of view. Then they became bolder. One evening, as she brushed her teeth, she saw it, a shadow behind her in the mirror. She spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing. The air, however, had grown colder. She tried to tell herself it was her imagination, but deep inside, she knew something was wrong with this house. Something watched her. Something lurked just beyond the light. Then came the worst night of all. The whisper comes closer. She woke up in darkness. Not the comforting darkness of sleep, but a suffocating void, an oppressive blackness that swallowed everything. The power had gone out. Her phone was dead. And then she heard it. "Let me in." It was not just a whisper anymore. It was a plea, a demand, a voice like brittle leaves scraping against stone, thick with something ancient and hungry. She couldn't move. She couldn't scream. Then the floor creaked. Something was in the room with her. She fumbled blindly, searching for the lamp on her nightstand, but her hands touched nothing but air. The bed felt unfamiliar, as if the room had shifted, as if she were somewhere else entirely. And then a breath, right against her ear. "I'm already inside." She screamed. The lights flickered back on. Her room was as she had left it. The door was locked. The window was shut. But the closet was open. The things in the dark. Sophia didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, she had made a decision. She had to leave. She packed her bags hastily, throwing clothes into her suitcase with trembling hands. Then she heard it, a soft scratching sound, coming from inside the closet. She turned, dread coiling in her stomach. The door was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness within. Then, slowly, deliberately, it creaked open, a wave of cold air poured out, and something shifted in the shadows. A hand, pale, impossibly long fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. Sophia stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Then the whisper came again. "Where are you going?" The closet door slammed shut. She ran. She didn't stop to think, didn't look back. She grabbed her keys, flung the front door open, and fled into the night. She never returned to that house. The final discovery. Days later, the police investigated. They found the house exactly as she had left it. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances. Except for one thing. The closet was locked. When they forced it open, They found a staircase, a hidden passage leading deep underground. What they found beneath the house was never disclosed to the public, but one officer, pale and shaking, resigned the very next day. The house was abandoned again. No one dared to rent it after that. But sometimes at night, if you stand close enough to property, you can still hear the whisper, "Let me in."